Why is Ladakh protesting against New Delhi? India just doesn't seem to get that it can't run Kashmir against the wishes of its population. Despite the deployment of hundreds of thousands of troops, it faces resistance and protests from the Kashmiris every now and then. This time, the remote, high-altitude capital of Ladakh, Leh, in Indian-occupied Kashmir has erupted in turmoil. 4 people were killed after protests demanding greater political autonomy turned violent. Crowds torched a police vehicle and even the offices of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's BJP. For many, this was the breaking point in a long, simmering struggle against New Delhi's rule.
उन्होंने क्या किया सर, तो बंदूक लेके फायरिंग करना शुरू कर दिया, तो एक गोली मेरे नी में रखी सर, घुटने पे लग गया।
हम सब साथ बिल्कुल शांतिपूर्ण के साथ चल रहा था, तो लास्ट में उसी गेट के सामने आके अंदर जो गोली चलाया, इसकी वजह से कई आदमी को नुकसान हुआ।
Ladakh is home to just 300,000 people, about half of whom are Muslim and 40% Buddhist. But its importance is outsized. This sparsely populated region borders both China and Pakistan. It's one of India's most militarized occupied zones and a strategic enclave for New Delhi. So, why are people protesting? Back in 2019, Modi's government split Ladakh from Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir and scrapped its partial autonomy. For many Ladakhis, this meant protection over land, jobs, and identity vanished overnight. Decisions about development are now made in Delhi and handed down to officials sent from outside. Local voices say they've been sidelined. At the heart of this movement is the apex body Leh, a coalition of religious, political, and social organizations that emerged after 2019 to press Ladakh's case. It's led by Shering Dorje, a 77-year-old veteran politician and former minister. Dorje has become the voice of the protests. In a recent statement, the veteran leader said that they have been used like slaves. He vows that the struggle will continue until Ladakh wins real protections. The protests also show solidarity with Sonam Wangchuk, the educator turned activist who was on a hunger strike for 2 weeks. Authorities accuse Wangchuk of giving provocative speeches. He was arrested just days after the deadly clashes, sparking even more anger. So, what do people actually want? Protesters are calling for 1. Constitutional protections under India's 6th schedule, which would give Ladakh its own legislature. 2. Safeguards for land rights so outsiders can't buy property. And 3. Guarantees that jobs and resources will remain with locals. And remember, Ladakh isn't just a domestic issue. China also claims parts of this territory, specifically Aksai Chin, which is a high-altitude desert currently under Chinese administration. This is a long-standing dispute. In the 1950s, China built a strategic highway through Aksai Chin, linking Tibet with Xinjiang. India saw it as an incursion, and it became one of the sparks of the 1962 Sino-Indian War. The disagreement boils down to competing boundary lines. India bases its claim on the Johnson Line, while China recognizes the McCartney-MacDonald Line, which puts Aksai Chin firmly within Chinese borders. Fast forward to today. This border remains tense, and clashes between Indian and Chinese troops in 2020 left dozens dead. For New Delhi, keeping Ladakh stable is not just about governance, but also about national security. Now, let's talk about what's at stake. Land is one of the most sensitive issues. The Indian government has announced mega solar parks and industrial projects that require thousands of acres. Locals fear that this will wipe out grazing grounds for the Pashmina goats that produce the world's finest cashmere wool, a centuries-old livelihood already threatened by climate change and by military buffer zones along the Chinese border. And then there is also a sense of betrayal. Unlike Indian-occupied Kashmir, where opposition to Indian rule is long-standing, Ladakhis historically supported India. They've stood with the army in past wars against both Pakistan and China. But now many say that loyalty isn't being reciprocated. On Wednesday in Leh, the anger boiled over. Authorities claim security forces fired in self-defense, but protest leaders insist that the violence reflects years of pent-up frustration. Curfews were imposed, mobile internet cut. Even the Ladakh Congress Party criticized the arrests and warned that silencing leaders would only strengthen the agitation. So, what's the bigger picture here? The stakes go beyond one protest. Ladakh sits on the front line of India's rivalry with China. Any instability there has national security implications. At the same time, the crisis highlights India's struggle to balance central control with local aspirations, especially among its youth. Ladakhis have already won small concessions. 85% of government jobs are reserved for locals, and outsiders can't apply for domicile status until 2036. But leaders like Dorje say that there is still a long way to go.